be starting out, I think about now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to On the Contrary, the show. In NFL DFS, it's unafraid to give you the most controversial, most outlandish opinions, and of course, some of the best sleepers you're going to find out there in the world of DFS. I'm Chris Spags, joined as always by the founder of Awesemo.com, the top DFS player in the world, and my good pal on these shows, Alex Baker, better known as Awesemo. How are you doing, Alex?
Doing good, man. Week three, pretty interesting one. Week four looks like we got some super chalk, and that's always a good opportunity to either make a stand or maybe it's just too good, and you gotta roll with it. And maybe find those sleeper picks that will give you a unique lineup. So it'll be really interesting to break that down with you guys.
And we have another great mind here in our quest to bring you guys the best third mics possible for this season of On the Contrary. Ian Hartitz from Roto World, who does a lot of great content over there. One of the better follows you'll find on Twitter. Let's go check him out at iHeartTits on Twitter. Ian, how are you doing?
Doing good, guys. Appreciate you having me on. I think week four is going to be, best week yet, only until we get to week five and ready to talk about some of those sleepers. So, yeah, man.
We got a lot to hit on over the course of this next hour. And real fast, let's do a quick plug for Fantasydraft because they are one of the providers who are helping us put the show on every week, help us get some great guys like Ian on here. Let's go check them out right now. They are the official home of Rake-Free Daily Fantasy, and their Hooters main event is thriving as always. Another big contest, the biggest and best. No management fee, no rake tournament you'll find out there. Let's go to fantasydraft.com right now and use that promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, for your free 7-day trial. First $1,000 in rake-free entries. And Alex, as is always the case with this week in particular, what could you have bought with all the rake that you paid across all the DFS sites?
A lot of Hooters wings. I like that little relationship they're building there. But the entry fee this week is $28 for their main event. And for each entry you make, you're essentially saving $3 or more depending on what site you're playing on in rake. And what that means is if you're entering, $1,000 a week, I mean, that would be like some of the grinders out there. Maybe you're entering $100 or whatever. You're saving a considerable amount that you can put towards your wing budget. $3 per entry, that's like 3 wings per entry. And actually, I'm getting kind of hungry right now.
Get yourself some Daytona sauce, some Korean barbecue sauce, whatever they have there on the menu. Go check it out. But yeah, Hooters actually, by the way, sponsoring my former employer at Barstool. So maybe we can get that Hooters money in here if Fantasy Draft wants to share that love. But either way, check out fantasydraft.com. Use that promo code AWESEMO and get your 7-day trial because rake-free DFS is the way to be living. All right, Ian, let's talk real fast because I always find it interesting when we have guys like you on. You're doing a ton of content over at Roto World. Obviously, a lot more need there with some of the guys who moved on to do some other endeavors this offseason. But how much time are you putting in? Because you're watching film, you're putting out 5 or 6 different content pieces a week, you're doing podcasts. How much time a week do you think you're spending on both the research and the content prep for NFL?
It's definitely a grind, man, from Sunday morning to about Thursday afternoon. I'm not answering too many phone calls or going out for too many drinks during that stretch. But, yeah, it's big having, NFL Game Pass condensed games. I'm usually able to knock out all those by about Tuesday morning. From there, just going over all the snap counts and everything. I do a running backfield breakdown every week to go through, get a good idea of what's going on there. Longest article is definitely a wide receiver cornerback and tight end analysis. I look at every situation around the league, make sure I'm not missing anything in the passing games. And then last one, which I just added this week, is the mismatch manifesto, where I look at, kind of some matchup-specific stats like pace, pressure, maybe some things that, don't deserve an entire article to themselves, but just looking at that around the league and seeing, explosive plays and other thing, just seeing where there are spots that maybe team-wide stats that pop out. And then from there, we can, dive into more of the intricacies of it, find those guys that are also getting the workloads in the good spots, and hopefully take advantage of it come Sunday.
So go check out iHeartitz on Twitter. He does HARTITZ because it is a good spot there. It's pinned tweets from Ian. We'll show you all the content he's put out there. It's interesting that you mentioned pace because I do have a question about, obviously you're watching a ton of stuff with Game Pass. You're doing all your content. Is there anything you've observed in this season so far that's different? Because to me, the pace is one of the bigger parts. Pace and deep throws are two things which I think people have taken from the Kansas City and the Rams in particular. And I think a lot of teams, the pace for all these teams seems to be up across the board. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, the deep throw point is definitely key. I actually looked at, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday this week, but I just took all the quarterbacks' 2019 deep ball rates, percentage of passes that go 20-plus yards downfield, 2019 versus 2018, to see what schemes are looking a lot different. Number one was Lamar Jackson. He's had like a 13% increase, which I think we all kind of figured would happen just from watching those games. Number two, though, Matt Stafford in Detroit. It's no longer this check down offense to Golden Tate and Theo Riddick. We're seeing Darryle Bevel really coming in there and throwing the ball around a little bit more. Or at least when they are throwing the ball, it's going downfield more, I should say. And so we've kind of seen that with Kenny Galladay pop-up weeks, Marvin Jones last week. And, Kenny Galladay and Hollywood Brown are the only guys this season with double-digit targets over 20 yards downfield. So I love this spot with the Kenny Galladay bounce back after he let everyone down in that smash spot against the Eagles last week.
Yeah, that was one of those. Alex, how about you? Because I know you're also looking at a lot of stuff, maybe not the same data points that Ian and I may be looking at regularly. You have your own world of data in front of you. What have you seen so far in 2019 that's maybe jumped out to you?
Yeah, I gotta agree with Ian's take on my undefeated Lions. I'm very excited about them, and maybe Matthew Stafford will go back to his ways where he's winning people some tournaments. Hoping to see that day, maybe coming week 4. I have to agree with you guys about the pace. Arizona is really changing the way the game is played. Kind of calling back to the Philadelphia offenses of a few years ago, where they're just running the game at a much greater pace, and that creates more opportunities for them and their opponents. So, looking to them every week, and also some of the slower teams like New Orleans and Chargers may be tougher matchups than they appear because teams are just running fewer plays in that game. So I think those are important stats to take note of. Also, the penalties have been huge this year. One big difference is you can review some penalties, and that's been a huge change in the way the game is played. It's kind of dynamic, like it's changing week to week. One week Tom Brady sends out a tweet, and then the next week, like the way they call penalties has totally changed. So, yeah, the more we can keep up to date on just the dynamics of how they're calling the games, the better we can do in DFS.
I'm sure Giselle using her back channels to get her influence for Tom Brady to get the penalties down. That's probably what that was, not his own influence. He relies on her for everything, including UGG slipper shopping, which is a key part of her role. But let's get it going here, guys. And of course, we are on YouTube, so hit that like button, guys, because the takes on this show will only be as good as the amount of likes that this video gets. That's just how it works. It's just simple algorithmic math. So go hit that like button down below. We appreciate the support. And also go to osmo.com/join and check out the packages we have there. Use the promo code CONTRARY, get half off your first month of Osmo Plus. Also, there's a ton of packages out there, including ones that are as low as $3.95 a week, our express packages. So a lot of ways for you to build lineups, whether you're a low effort player, a casual player, or a guy who's investing in Fantasy Cruncher and all of it. Go check out our packages that we have right now at osmo.com/join. All right, the first game here, Alex, you hinted at it. I don't think the pace is going to matter quite so much here, but maybe it will with the Chargers going into Miami, a game in which they are a gigantic favorite despite being on the road, 15 points favoring them. 29.3 implied points for the Chargers. We have a lot of ownership, it looks like, this week, too. The top owned plays in Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen, guys who really do deserve it. And also, there's just an abundance of confusion now because there's no real wide receivers left for the Chargers, it seems. And also, the running back situation is a bit of a mess with Melvin Gordon back, Justin Jackson out. Is Melvin Gordon going to be playing? We don't know yet. So, Alex, I'll throw it to you first. How are you feeling about Austin Eckler's prospects amidst all of these things and a lot of question marks, but he's going to be owned, it seems?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it at this point because I feel like the Chargers are kind of breadcrumbing us. They're like, Melvin Gordon is not going to play this week. Then he's doubtful. And then all of a sudden, maybe he's playing this week. And then, maybe Sunday comes news that he's starting. So, probably not. Probably Eckler will get most of the work. But this is not a situation where Gordon doesn't know the playbook. They could integrate him fully into the game plan if they choose to. And it's going to be really hard to predict until the first game he plays what kind of division of labor it's going to be. I think the most likely outcome is Eckler does get more of the work than Gordon. I'm kind of operating under the assumption Gordon will play, but I think Gordon will take more rushing attempts than Justin Jackson did, and then maybe be worked more slowly into the passing game because Eckler is the better pass-catching back. The injuries are huge here because with Miami, they're going to put up points for sure. It's just a matter of who does it. And Mike Williams out, Travis Benjamin doubtful. I saw Ian tweet out that Dontrell Inman is a good play at 3K. Make sure to follow him, iHeartHits on Twitter. And I have to agree. I mean, he's the next guy up, and he has a record of putting up some good fantasy games.
Yeah,
Ian, how are you feeling about the situation here? Because Eckler is still a guy who's going to be very highly owned. And if Melvin Gordon does take some off the table, that certainly decreases Eckler's upside, but it's against Miami. So the upside is still kind of unlimited. How are you feeling about this running back situation?
Yeah, so like you said with Miami, I mean, to have this perfect smash spot of a matchup makes me feel a little better about the reduced role. And also just the way Eckler has been operating. I mean, we saw Justin Jackson last week kind of start to sink his teeth into more of those early down carries, a little bit more so than weeks 1 and 2. But Eckler's still getting all the passes, man. He's had at least 6 receptions every week. So I think with that type of pass game floor, even if Gordon comes in and has a bigger role than we're expecting, because I do think he will be in kind of a limited role. I mean, I'm thinking best case kind of a 50-50 snap rate for Gordon and Eckler. But even if that happens, I think Eckler's getting his targets, so it's not going to just completely crush your lineups. But yeah, man, I mean, I was looking forward to playing Justin Jackson at 41K or whatever he was DraftKings before this midweek injury. But I'm still okay with going with Eckler. I think if anything, this Gordon news is going to scare people off. And like I said, he still does have that floor with the receiving and the matchup. But yeah, give him to Dontrell Inman here, guys, because look, he's not just some scrub like 4th receiver that is getting thrown to the offense. Like he's been with Rivers plenty of times over the years now. And even before these injuries, like he was rotating in with Travis Benjamin in 3 wide receiver sets. So he is ingrained in the offense, and he's now the number 2 receiver there. And I'd be very surprised if Xavier Howard doesn't follow Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen. I'd be very surprised if Xavier Howard doesn't follow Keenan Allen all over the formation, because not only like Minka Fitzpatrick was a slot corner to start the year, he's obviously in Pittsburgh. And even their guy last week, Jamal Wiltz, who came in to be their backup slot corner, he's hurt now too. So truly, like the Dolphins starting secondary with Rowe and all that, like not very good to begin with. And now they're on like their 4th and 5th stringers outside of Xavier Howard. So we're talking Inman against some true scrubs. I think Keenan Allen can get his anyway, just out of pure target volume and with all the dudes banged up. But yeah, Eckler, Inman, and of course Keenan Allen this week.
Yeah, Inman definitely a sleeper, a guy who's already been getting over 1 target of 20+ yards per game already, and I was with Mike Williams out there, so theoretically could stand to build on that as a bare minimum play on most of the sites industry-wide. But Keenan Allen is the guy who is obviously been smashing everything, the leader in targets, also getting more deep targets this year for him as well, and just looking strong across the board. But Alex, I know you're not huge on playing some of these guys in games that seem like they're going to be pretty big blowouts. How are you feeling about Keenan Allen this week and his prospects? Because he's going to also be one of the chalk plays of the week.
Yeah, I'm more concerned when I'm running out of game stack, so I'm a little bit down on Philip Rivers this week because to really put up a monster quarterback performance, he only passes the ball. He doesn't really run at all. And what's going to happen if they're up 2 touchdowns or more is in the second half, I think they're going to run the ball more, slow down the clock a little bit, and it'll be hard for Rivers to get there to the extent you're going to need to win a GPP. But that doesn't apply to a guy like Keenan Allen to his great extent, because if he gets in the end zone once, maybe gets a good first half, he'll be out there running a bunch of routes until at least the 3rd quarter in a blowout, I'm sure, before they start running the clock. So I'm less concerned about the skill position players than the game stack. But I think the game stack is somewhat in play. One guy that I'm interested in on Miami is Albert Wilson. He's been saying that he's ready to be fully back from this calf injury, and he's a good player when he's on the field. So I think that he could be kind of going under the radar since he hasn't played this year very much.
Ian, I'll turn it to you then. Would you have any Dolphins to run it back with? Devontae Parker, one of the air yards leaders on the year, running a good amount of routes, but has not paid them off with a poor catch rate, about 20%. And also Preston Williams, a guy who's had that rapport with Josh Rosen. They've known each other since high school. Would you have any interest in Wilson, Williams, or Devontae Parker?
I like Wilson out of the group. Devontae had that circus catch last week, but him and Preston overall, man, just really hasn't been pretty. I sent out a video earlier this week of some of the drops Josh Rosen's had to deal with this year, and it is ugly, guys. I mean, Rosen's playing pretty all right. I don't know if there's been a player that's had 2 worse situations to start his career in recent memory, but I like the Albert Wilson call. We've only seen him for 6 snaps this season, and he somehow got 4 targets in those snaps. It really does seem like they want to run the offense through him. He is the slot guy. He'll be getting the higher percentage stuff. But Yeah, I mean, the blowout concern, I still feel okay with trusting Keenan Allen in a blowout just because, like, obviously they have to score points to get that blowout situation. And so much of this offense is running through Keenan Allen. He's number one in target share, league-wide, number one in air yard market share. So he is getting the downfield targets, like you said. So when you do have that much going through a guy, like, if it's going to be a blowout, Keenan Allen's going to have a big first half and be a big part of that blowout. So, yeah, mostly avoiding Miami, though, other than Albert Wilson defensively.
People in the YouTube chat, I got to call this out. Mubi02, air yard's been a controversial topic here on the Osmo channel because one of our guys here on the shows does not believe in them. And apparently we both said air yards a few times here, Ian. So we're now in trouble with the YouTube chat because we're going to get them hammered. I'm going to say air yards like 25 more times at least over this next hour. So.
I have to agree with our chat. I prefer actual yards.
Are you like, so people who call ADOT, like I think people like that more because it sounds more like scientific, but air yards is the same thing. It's I don't know. People don't like air yards.
So I think air yards, like, it's a really good stat to describe like Hollywood Browns last week, where you look and he had 2 catches for 40 yards or whatever, and that's not very good. And you look at 9 targets, you go, oh, that's not bad. 215 air yards or whatever he had, like, all that tells you is that he's getting deep balls, these fantasy-friendly targets that he didn't come down with. But if he comes down with 1 or 2 of those, there's a difference between coming down with a 60-yard target and a 10-yard target, obviously. So I think that's it's just kind of a good substitute if you didn't really watch the game and see, the exact types of targets that they were missing out on.
That's exactly what I said last week, Ian. So I'm glad we're on the same page. I think it tells you a picture of like how the things are going because targets only tell you so much, but air yards are a way of seeing the field a little more visibly and knowing the guys. Like, there's a big difference between a Jamison Crowder and a Marquise Brown because they're they're getting the same amount of targets.
All right, you guys win this one.
Theoretical opportunity, Alex. That's the deal that we like here. Routes run and air yards. That's what we're going to change the name of the show to. Let's keep going here. We got some more chalky spots to hit on. Of course, some more sleepers to get for you guys. Washington at the Giants. This is going to be the chalk spot du jour, but maybe some sleepers as well. It looks like Daniel Jones, Wayne Gallman, and Evan Ingram are all going to be pretty well owned. Washington, Terry McLaurin had a little hamstring pull. It does seem like he's good to go for the week. He's also going to have some ownership on him. So, Alex, I'll turn it to you first. A Giants chalk. After 1 week of Daniel Jones, we are now anointing him as a legitimately good quarterback. Are you comfortable with this Giants chalk given the situation?
Yeah, I mean, not only are they in a good spot versus Washington, where they're favored by 3 points, I mean, everyone who won money picking Daniel Jones last week is probably going to run it back. So I'm expecting a lot of people to be on him. But the prices really haven't come up enough to adjust for that quarterback change. Daniel Jones, a superior fantasy player to Eli Manning because he runs the ball. Last week he had 2 touchdowns, which really showed the potential in that. And Saquon Barkley out creates some Wayne Gallman chalk. He's dirt cheap depending on the site. On Yahoo, he's the minimum price, which I found amusing. But on every site, he's going to be pretty good. Evan Ingram continuing to be a big source of targets. And until Golden Tate comes back, I expect him to be the leading receiver on the team. So I think there's some good options here on the Giants side. Washington side, more value plays like McLaurin and Chris Thompson, but I still think this is a really appealing game.
So I guess out of all those guys, Ian, who would be your favorite Giant to play? Obviously, Wayne Gallman seems like he should be a lock in cash for the most part on pretty much every site you're going to be playing cash games on. But for tournaments, who would be your preferred guy out of, let's say, just the skill position guys, out of Ingram, Gallman, and Sterling Shepard?
Yeah, I agree with you on Gallman, just cash games. I don't know that he's this talented guy, like super talented guy or anything. Obviously nothing close to Barkley. That price in this matchup is just tough to get behind. I would say, though, I think there's a little bit of Josh Allen potential in this Giants offense with Daniel Jones under center, just in that you now have a quarterback that does run around, that does throw the ball downfield, and defense has got to account for those. So I think it's good for the offense as a whole, but I also don't think Daniel Jones seems like the type of quarterback that's going to be checking down to Wayne Gallman all game like we saw Eli always do with Saquon. So 0 targets last week for Gallman and 41 snaps or something. A little bit of a red flag there, but again, the pricing just makes it tough to get off him. On the Giants side of the ball, man, how can you not keep rolling with Evan Ingram? I mean, I'm looking at DraftKings specifically, 5,700 for the pretty much undisputed number 1 receiver on the team. I know Sterling Shepard's there too, but Ingram's just so good, and he's getting all these targets. And you guys mentioned the Washington secondary, definitely not a unit to fear. I kind of like the other side of the ball, though, more than the Giants. Like, let's get off the chalk and face the actual worst defense in the game, because the only team that has allowed more yards per play and yards per pass attempt this year than the Giants is the Dolphins. Like, seriously. People talk about Josh Norman being dust now. What does that make Janoris Jenkins? Because this guy hasn't slowed down anyone all season long. Terry McLaurin obviously was mega chalk before the whole hamstring thing popped up. That's not great. Paul Richardson, the 3,700 though in DK, like he's in play. Trey Quinn, Stone Cold Min, which we talked about air yards. He's the Jamison Crowder-esque air yard guy, so not helping you a bunch there. But Chris Thompson's getting the targets, and even Case Keenum, guys, to be under 5K. And this was a guy, look, he was trash against the Bears, but a lot of quarterbacks are trash against the Bears. He's been the QB9 this season, and he's priced as the QB23 on DK. So, again, with this matchup, and if we can kind of go against the grain a little bit of the chalkier Giants, I don't hate loading up on the Washington guys.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a move. And Keenum is a guy I find interesting. He's throwing over 40 pass attempts a game, 41.3 per game, has a 69% completion rate, which is not only nice, but also offers value to everybody else on that team. McLaurin's one of my favorite players in the league. I added him in our Awesemo Celebrity Charity League thing. I added him in pretty much everywhere because he's been running a ton of routes. He's running just under 40 routes per game, getting those deep targets. Alex, how are you feeling about this Washington offense? I do notice you have actually a pretty good projection for Case Keenum.
Yeah, I mean, Keenum has been a big upgrade for Washington's passing game compared to last year. I mean, they ran out like a carousel of various quarterbacks. So Case Keenum, kind of a more proven player, not excellent, but good enough. And the matchup versus the Giants is certainly favorable. And the main thing is these guys are still cheap. So, Ian, you mentioned Trey Quinn being the minimum. He's a great option. Chris Thompson, if you're playing the Giants stack, he's a great option to run it back because he should be out there more when they're down. Adrian Peterson should be the guy getting more work if they're up. And I think that Keenum is stackable for sure, especially given that Terry McLaurin and Trey Quinn, Vernon Davis, these guys are all like really cheap, and you can stack your lineup with really good players around them.
Yeah, Vernon Davis is a guy who does kind of jump out to me because we do have one tight end who looks really chalky, which I'll spoil it for you guys. Will Dissly looks very chalky right now, getting that funnel spot against the Arizona defense. It's given up a lot to the tight end. But Vernon Davis could be a pivot at that price point, getting 5 targets per game, running a good amount of routes for a tight end, 33 routes per game. And he has that big playability, even though he is an older man. He's still got the jets where you can bring him out. That just jump out to me as anything. I guess the question here, guys, I just want to circle back to Wayne Gallman real fast. His tournament ownership right now, we have him a bit over 20% on DK. It's going to be pretty similar everywhere else. Alex, how much Gallman would you want to have in your lineups relative to the field?
20% I think is way too low. If it continues to be at that rate, I'll probably have him a lot just because he is such a great value. I think they only have a converted fullback, Elijah Penny, behind him. So I don't expect Gallman to play like every offensive snap, but he should play most of them because I don't think Penny is really the type to be part of a full committee. And until the Giants sign another running back, Gallman's going to be their guy, and that carries a lot of value. Ian pointed out he probably won't get as many targets as if Eli Manning was starting, but still, price is pretty good.
And that was something you mentioned, too, with Daniel Jones, where there might just be less targets to the running back anyway, even with Saquon in there, because Daniel Jones will run it himself and maybe take less of those checkdowns. But so that was a good point by you last week, Alex. Ian, how about you? Wayne Gallman, his ownership going to be around 20%-ish. How much are you trying to have of him this week?
Yeah, I agree. That seems a little low. If we're going to eat the chalk a little bit, it should be with a running back that's going to have a 3-down workload. So I was a little more off Gallman earlier in the week when I saw they were bringing in guys like Fozzie Whitaker and just kind of Gettleman's blast from the pass at that running back position. But they didn't sign any of them. So it is looking like Gallman's going to have the workhorse role. And, next week they got the Vikings. Week after that they got the Patriots. I'm way more inclined to fade this offense in those matchups, but can't ask for a better spot here. So, yeah, I'll have plenty of Gallman.
A bit of surprise he didn't bring in Mike Tolbert there. Give him one more shot. That would be a prime Gettleman move, but I guess 33 years old. He's probably got a little bit left in the tank. Bring in Mike Tolbert. I dare you, Dave Gettleman. I dare you. Let's go on to the next game here. Kansas City at Detroit. And this is a game you've probably seen the tweet going viral this week from a couple different people pointing out. Last time Patrick Mahomes played in the Dome was in college, and he had over 600 yards and 6 touchdowns in that game. Now, obviously, every time he goes into a dome, we can expect that moving forward. But he does look great here going against a Detroit team who, as we mentioned earlier, I think Ian mentioned that they are passing more deep downfield, not killing the clock as much as you would think overall. Their pace, not bad. And Detroit, not that it matters for Kansas City anyway, because they are so elite, as you've seen before against Oakland. Pat Mahomes could throw 4 touchdowns and 250 yards in a quarter, so it doesn't even matter. Alex, how are you feeling about the prospects for Patrick Mahomes here in a dome? And are you buying the dome hype? Are you upgrading his projection based upon his dome availability?
Man, I didn't have the dome split stats, but now that I do, I mean, I think that brings Mahomes from a good play to a great one. But I mean, he's the top quarterback in the league. Also, probably the most expensive one on a week-to-week basis. So, definitely a top option every week. If I have Mahomes, I'll probably try to have some Detroit players as well. But especially with Tyreek Hill out, we've seen Watkins and Kelsey not really have a breakout game, but they should get plenty of targets. And then we have some guys like McCole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson. Those guys are more like dart throw plays, but because they've had big games, I expect them to be a little bit more popular than maybe they should be. So I'll probably be going for the top targets there, Watkins and Kelsey.
Yeah, one thing about Hardman which jumped out to me with NFL's next-gen stats for receivers, they've added some more stuff. Last year was kind of QB heavy. Hardman leading the league in separation on targets, so he's getting, I think, over 5 yards per target of separation, and also leading on expected yards after the catch. He's exceeding whatever the expectation would be by a decent margin. So an intriguing play there. Ian, how are you feeling about the Kansas City stack? Because Alex is going to go with the expected guys, but it seems like the non-expected guys are going off every week.
Yeah, I do like Hardman over Robinson, just because it does seem like the Chiefs are using him kind of as their big play field stretch. Like they are designing the deep balls to go to Hardman. Robinson has gotten open on a few, and Mahomes just tossed up a few for him and he's come down with them. So obviously, he had that one-handed catch last week. Robinson's obviously awesome, but I do think like they're more worried about making sure Hardman gets 5 to 6 opportunities per game than Robinson. But I'm more on Sammy Watkins than Kelsey this week, I think. Just seeing after the way the Lions defended Ertz last week, really bracketed him in double coverage all game. The thing about, Kelsey's so good and so is Mahomes, so you don't want to really fade any of these guys. I get that, but this is a spot where I could see more focused coverage on Kelsey. It's just hard not to not to love everyone on this Chiefs offense. I think going back with Shady, I think a lot of us got thrown off last week with that pregame report of him being behind Darryle Williams and all that. So that bit a lot of us in the ass. But it does seem like he'll be out there. He's going to play through the pain, but he's going to be the 1A back in the Chiefs' most fantasy-friendly offense playing through the pain. So I like that. Attack this Lions defense. Darius Slay, hamstring injury. He's not looking 100%. So I think this is definitely the week we see Sammy Watkins get going after a little 2 quiet games. Even though he hasn't been getting the same deep balls, which hasn't kind of been the blow-up performances, he looks so good after the catch, and the targets are there.
Yeah, still a 28% target share for Sammy Watkins on the year. And Alex, the running game here we should hit on real fast because I'm sure you have some thoughts about it. Detroit's defense, a pretty poorly graded 62 run grade from PFF in terms of their run defense. So there should be opportunity for either Shady or Darryle Williams, depending upon who gets the look. How are you feeling about these guys? Because prices are reasonable given their upside, but it is a split workload, and but there's not much ownership on them, so that might be a spot for you to attack.
Yeah, I think that McCoy is a fine fantasy option. He had a great game last week. The one concerning factor was he did split about half the snaps with Darryle Williams, which was a little bit less workload than I imagined. And a lot of that probably will come down to his health this week. Maybe having a little bit of time to recover. He'll be he'll get more of the snaps, but that's just pure speculation. But the price is pretty good, depending on the site. And on the other side, Carrie Johnson has pretty good potential as well.
Let's talk about the Lions side, because we are going to have some ownership here on Kerryon Johnson, Kenny Golladay, a guy we just talked about earlier as well. And Alex, your boys are undefeated here. So how are you feeling about the Lions offense here in a spot where you have to assume they're going to need to score some points, and maybe even Kerryon has to try to squeeze the air of the ball as much as he can?
Yeah, it was crazy that they've been underdog in 2 out of 3 games, and they've won both of those. So they've been exceeding expectations. They're like a huge underdog to Kansas City, obviously. So this would be a spot where maybe Matthew Stafford will have to throw the ball, and as Ian noted, they've been throwing downfield a lot this year, so that's promising. Amendola didn't really see as much work last week as we'd like, but Golladay and Marvin Jones, they were on the field most of the game. Carrie Johnson played 3/4 of the snaps, got 20 rushing attempts, ran routes on more than half the Lions' passing plays. So we're seeing pretty good workloads for those three guys, and I think in a tough matchup versus Kansas City, they're always a team that allows you to get a lot of plays in because they don't run long drives, and maybe the Lions will get plenty of opportunities to put up some points.
Yeah, then one thing to note about Stafford too, which jumped out to me, only a 3% sack rate for him this year, which limited sample size, but down from 7% last year. So they are doing a better job protecting him, which is going to be important, especially with him having an injury that's got him downgraded to questionable, but it seems like he's going to be a go. Ian, how are you feeling about the targets here for Detroit? How are you feeling about Carrie and Galladay, and even Marvin Jones, who's running basically the same amount of routes as Galladay, not getting the same amount of targets, but he has shown gigantic upsides in games in which the offense does flow a little more freely.
Yeah, this could be one of the top games to pay attention to the Sunday morning actives with, just because, like you said, Stafford's got this hip injury that popped up. It does seem like he'll play. I mean, that guy, I don't think he's missed the game since like 2011. He really is a warrior. But Carrie Johnson, like Osmo was saying, 75% snap rate last week, career high 20 rushes in the first game of the post CJ Anderson era. But the one big thing with that was Paul Perkins wasn't active yet. So there is a chance that, Paul Perkins is active this week, and they do just see him as this guy that's going to take, what CJ Anderson's workload was. I think we all agree Carrie should be getting these types of touches every single week. I mean, he's that good of a talent, but, the Lions have shown that they're not always willing to do that. So definitely paying attention to Perkins. I do think Galladay is the only guy in this passing game that's going to consistently get the targets. I mean, even though he dudded last week, he had 9 targets. And again, they're usually fantasy-friendly, deep ball variety. So good to see there. If I am going to go out on a limb with someone else this week, I think it's Hawkinson. Just 3,300. He's a little bit of a pivot off of Disley. I do think he is really talented. I mean, he should have had a touchdown last week. He just barely stepped out of the back of the end zone before he came down with it. So with the Chiefs, potentially focusing more coverage on the outside receivers, could see Hawkinson having himself a little bit of a day up the seam and all that.
I think if Amendola were out, he's currently questionable too. But if he were out, I think there are actually reports from, it wasn't like the main Detroit paper, but it was one of the local Michigan papers that was saying that Hawkinson could see snaps out of the slot if Amendola's out. So that's another one I would watch closely too. I don't know if you saw anything about that.
No, I think I do remember seeing that. That's a very good point.
Yes, I know. Just something to keep in mind. Again, injuries always very important. But this week in particular, kind of early in the year, we do have some questionable guys. And in a game like this, where there could be some high scoring, I do think it's one that we probably have to watch very closely here. Let's keep going because we have some other important games here. And again, guys, hit that like button. We're at the halfway point of the show. And the takes only get stronger if you hit that like button. So please hit that right now. So Seattle going into Arizona, which has been basically the Coors Field match with the NFL this year because they're playing at an outlandish pace still for Arizona's side and also with a not good defense. Seattle last week, Russell Wilson looked resurgent because Chris Carson keeps fumbling the game away. And Wilson should be a little bit owned this week, actually pretty well owned, one of the top owned QBs, it looks like. Tyler Lockett also going to have some ownership. Will Disley, as I mentioned earlier, going to be one of the chalkier tight end plays with people chasing some more opportunity for him with no Nick Vannett. And also just a really good year for him so far in a limited sample. He's running less routes, but he's been getting targeted pretty well on those routes. Probably due for some touchdown regression, but still been looking solid. Let's talk the Seattle side first. Alex, how are you feeling about the Seattle offense here and all the chalky plays that are therein?
I think you have to like them a lot because Arizona, not a great team, and they run at a really fast pace. So Seattle's projected to do very well this week, and they have great fantasy players. I'm a little bit less keen on the running game this week because Rashad Penny should be back, and Chris Carson is a big question mark, having all the fumble issues. So his role is a little bit in question, I suppose. So that makes it hard to really trust any of the guys in the backfield. As far as pass catchers, I mean, Lockett had an amazing game last week. I wouldn't be shy about going back to the well there. And then Will Disley, with Nick Vannett being traded, he should get more of a workload. He's been running routes on about half of the passing plays for the Seahawks. I don't think he will get like a monster workload because they did sign with Luke Wilson. Since he's a new player on the team, I don't think he'll be super involved in the passing game, but he should be in on a lot of. He'll be in on a decent amount of plays, I'm sure. So I'm not expecting Disley to play the whole game. I could be wrong, but I think he's priced very well. So when he's out there, he's really effective, and I don't see any problem other than potentially maybe he's just so popular.
Yeah, and Wilson was a Seahawk a couple years ago. I think the offense has changed enough with Schottenheimer because I believe he was there when it was still Bevel. But he could be back in there, and certainly there's some familiarity. But Vanette's absence, as you mentioned, does leave 17 routes per game on the table. Ian, how are you feeling about Will Dissly? Let's talk about him first because he is going to be very highly owned. And I mean, he does seem like a guy with more opportunity, can certainly do more. He's a big body. He's very athletic. How are you feeling about Dissly's prospects?
Yeah, Dissly's only played like 6 career games to this point, but he's found the end zone and had like really good weeks in 4 of them. So when you do take Nick Vanette out of the equation, and I agree, he's not going to play 100% snaps with Wilson there, but I mean, if he was around 50-60% guy before, I think we can at least expect, something in that 70-80% rate. And when you're facing clearly the worst secondary in the league against defending tight ends that, couldn't even come close to hanging with old man Greg Olsen last week, you got to feel good about Dissly at that price point. The one guy here that I'm just not hearing enough about, I mean, look, we all agree, Cardinals, we want to target this defense, that Russ is awesome, Lockett and Dissly are at good price points. Where's the love for DK Metcalf, though? Mm-hmm. And I feel like everyone's holding on to kind of this pre-draft, like they didn't love the guy, and he can't run a 3-cone drill all that well, but he's getting at least 6 targets a game this year. He's gotten at least 60 yards in every game, and he's Russ's downfield guy, and they're consistently throwing the ball to him. So we saw David Moore return last week, and all he did was really take away from Jerome Brown. So, I mean, Metcalf is really locked in, I think, as Russ's number 2 pass catcher. And with this dream matchup, and I'm really not seeing high ownership on Metcalf throughout the industry, I'm fine taking a stab there.
Yeah. Also, Arizona giving up a 42% boost to wide receiver 2s, according to DVOA from Football Outsiders. Ooh. Metcalf getting 2.7 targets at 20+ yards per game, and also running about the same amount of routes as Lockett. And it does seem like his catch rate's pretty low, 47% for Metcalf, but that's due to positively regress, one would think, with an accurate quarterback. Alex, how are you feeling about DK Metcalf here? Could he be a sneaky sleeper this week?
I think he could. I mean, he gets the deep balls, really talented player, high draft pick, and if no one is on him, he makes a nice pivot from some of the popular guys in a situation where we expect it to be very fruitful for fantasy.
How about the other side? Because Arizona, obviously that play volume is going to benefit them just as much as it is Seattle. They've been running a lot of plays. No Damiere Byrd out this week, so the expectations we're going to see more Keyshawn Johnson because they did release Michael Crabtree. It seemed like they want to get their younger guys involved. But also over 10 targets per game for Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk so far. So they're getting a ton of volume. And Kyler Murray, despite his failings last week, maybe that became as a result of running the ball more. He did also run the ball more and got some rushing yards as well. That gives him a better floor. So, Alex, how are you feeling about this Cardinals attack going against a Seattle defense that has really not been good in any facet this year?
I like them a lot. I mean, I think they got great fantasy options in Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk, who get a lot of the targets. I'm projecting him to have to throw the ball a ton because they're pretty substantial underdogs in this game. As you mentioned, Damiere Byrd is out, so I'm expecting Keyshawn Johnson and Trent Sherfield to both get in the game for most of the game since they run 4 wide receiver sets. And I think Fitzgerald and Fitzgerald and Kirk make nice kind of like chalk options to pair with Kyler Murray. Keyshawn Johnson or Trent Sherfield could be like that sleeper that wins your tournament.
Ian, how are you feeling about this Arizona offense? Because the results have been there, at least for most of the wide receivers. For Fitzgerald and Kirk, they're at least involved at a high level each week. And Kyler Murray, he's going to throw it for sure. How are you feeling about their chances?
Yeah, I mean, look, with Kyler, first 2 weeks of the year, we saw him go over 300 passing yards. We were worried about the rushing upside. Last week, we got the rushing upside and didn't get the passing yards. An explosion's coming at some point. It could absolutely happen against the Seahawks defense that we saw, Andy Dalton and company roasted them week 1 in Seattle. I mean, this is not the Legion of Boom, defense we need to be worried about from years past. They got lucky the last 2 weeks, had to face Mason Rudolph and Teddy Bridgewater. So I don't think they were too threatened there. But this could absolutely be a week where we see this Cardinals offense take a step forward and just seeing the way that Kyler really has fed his slot receivers. I mean, again, in this 4 wide receiver offense, Kirk and Fitz are the slot guys, full-time. Obviously, we're not seeing 2 full-time slot guys in any other offense around the league. And one of the big things that we're going to see continue to happen with that is not only are they getting all these targets, but they're getting the easiest matchups week to week because, teams will not overhaul their defensive scheme and move their outside cornerbacks, who are always usually better cornerbacks, into the slot to kind of take away these matchups. So definitely in this spot, I like these slot guys. My question is, how much of David Johnson do we want? Because his price is pretty reasonable now, especially under $7K. on DraftKings. He's been playing a ton. I mean, he would be like a 80-90% snap guy for the season if he didn't hurt his wrist a little bit in week 2 and miss some time. But his targets are there. I just don't know if his rushing floor is high enough, because this has been not only the fastest paced offense of the year, but it's been the most pass heavy offense as well. So even though DJ is playing, 80-90% snaps, if he only finished with 12 or 15 touches, I wouldn't be shocked.
Only 12 rushing attempts per game for David Johnson so far. That does include that wrist injury, so that could be a bit dinged, but not looking terribly involved. But he is going to have ownership. Alex, how are you feeling about David Johnson? Because Seattle, I guess one thing they have done well, they've limited running backs fairly well. It's 3.8 yards per rush, a 72 rush defense grade from PFF. So how are you feeling about David Johnson's prospects?
I'm not super high on him. I think the main reason is opportunity cost. David Johnson, a great player. He's not getting quite as many targets this year because we do have Kyler Murray running the ball more, scrambling, and they pass a lot, so he's not getting quite as many rushing attempts. And then we have just so many like really cheap, high volume guys like Wayne Gulman, like Leonard Fournette, and then we got the top end guys like Christian McCaffrey. So it becomes a little bit hard to fill out a roster while relying on David Johnson.
Yeah, that seems fair. And I would agree with that take too. I think at that price point, it is hard to get there. Maybe that offers some theoretically would offer some contrarian value, but with him projected for 19% ownership, does not appear like that contrarian value will be there. Let's keep going. We got a game with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading into LA for a matchup with the Rams. Rams getting 29.3 implied points, but not a ton of ownership. People seem like they're reluctant to trust the Rams. Perhaps the trickle-down effect of Todd Gurley not quite getting this year. Bucks on the other side not going to have any ownership for any of their guys. People not chasing the Mike Evans big week, it looks like. This does seem more like a Chris Godwin matchup, but he's a game-time decision, according to Bruce Arians, with his hip issues of his own. Alex, how are you feeling about this game? And I guess particularly the Rams, who really only look like they'll have ownership for Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I think anytime you got a team going against Tampa, I mean, their defense is better this year, but still the Rams are a big favorite. They're projected to put up almost 30 points. So I think the three wideouts, Cooks, Woods, and Kupp are in play. Kupp, over the past season, including the first 3 games of this year, has gotten targeted at a very high rate when he's running routes. So I project him to do better than Cooks and Woods on a weekly basis. I mean, that's subject to maybe some coaching changes, but if we're just going off the data, he's been targeted 24% of the time he's run a route according to PFF, and Cooks and Woods are at 18 and 19%, so it's big. And then Gurley is kind of in the back of my mind, not as good as last year, but still he's getting the majority of the work for a powerful offense. So I think that he's kind of like a sleeper territory play for me because his price isn't that low. But I think he'll get overlooked because he hasn't really put up much to this point.
Yeah, and also a tough Tampa Bay rushing defense, which does seem like the one point that Todd Bowles has really improved since coming over as the coordinator there. So that could also, theoretically drive the ownership down. And the Bucs could certainly be due for some positive or some negative regression on that run defense. Ian, how are you feeling about the Rams attack here? Because it is one of the higher implied totals on the slate, but people seem to be afraid to go there because they just don't know how the Rams offense is going to flow.
Yeah, Gurley's maybe my single favorite contrarian play of the week. I mean, I saw him at like 2.4%. Your guys' projected ownership. Yeah, sign me up for that. I mean, look, it's been a rough offseason for Gurley. Like, if we go back to kind of June, July, what we were thinking, I think if we compare like what we expected his role to be then versus now, we'd actually be pretty pleased with how it's turned out. He's playing 70% of snaps. Darryle Hendrickson, who's being rumored for like double touches per game, has played a handful of snaps all season. Like, he is completely not involved. There was this idea going around the industry after week 1 that Malcolm Brown was his vulture, which was just never based in reality. Like, they switch drives, and if they get inside the 10-yard line, whatever running back is on the field will stay on the field. They're not like consciously taking Gurley off the field inside the 5-yard line. Come on. So, yeah, I mean, with this huge implied total, Tampa Bay defense did look a lot better the first 2 weeks of the season in particular. I think I saw they had like one of the best like they were just every tackle like they're making, they really weren't missing many tackles. Like they were top 3 in the league, but saw them give up plenty of points to the Giants in week 3. I don't think their defense will be interfered by any stretch. And even though the Rams haven't looked all that great so far, I bet on McVay and these guys figuring it out before too long. So definitely going with Gurley. And then with these wide receivers, like Alex was saying, Kupp has just been getting fed the targets, but I'm not so convinced that he's necessarily like they want to consistently run the offense straight through Cooper Kupp. I still think they want to get all three of these wide receivers consistently involved. And with that, like, let's take the lowest known one, which is Robert Woods. And, he hasn't done a ton this year, but definitely a guy that, we've seen have a higher floor in, the past 18 to 24 games versus the 3 games of this season. So I think Woods can get going again. And, the fun little thing with all these wide receivers is McVay uses them in the rush game, like more than anyone. I mean, I was shocked to see Woods actually has 5 rush attempts already this year. So even if the targets aren't quite as high, you can at least add a couple extra touches that way. But yeah, man, give me Woods and Gurley especially. I'm not seeing a ton of love on the Buccaneers side of the ball. It is a tough spot. This Rams defense has been, other than that stretch last year where Talib was on IR and Peters was kind of playing hurt, trying to shadow number ones, like that went terribly. But other than that, they've been a really good secondary. And I hate to say this, but if Godwin's out with his hip injury, I think, ownership's going to fly up on Mike Evans, deservedly, but might have to go to O.J. Howard at that point. If Godwin's out of the picture, we can kind of put O.J. in as the number 2 guy. And, I think we all agree. I don't think his talent's gone anywhere. We saw him last week still make some big plays downfield. His snaps are there. His targets just haven't been there. And if we remove Godwin, who's kind of been that middle of the field intermediate guy from the equation, I think we could see O.J. Howard kind of get back on track, especially, I think, as a nice pivot off of Disley this week.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And Godwin is a guy who I do think is interesting, but yeah, I agree. Like if he is banged up and he's not going to make it in there, him being a game time decision, certainly a concern for a game with this timing. But yeah, it could be a spot here where O.J. Howard finally has some usefulness because his 3 targets per game currently aren't doing it, but we have to get something going against the Rams. Alex, how are you feeling real fast about the Bucs here? Because I know you do like to run game stacks back with a little bit from the other side. Who would be the Buc you'd run it back with if you were doing a Ram stack on the other side?
This game is just a little bit tougher to stack as a game stack because everyone's expensive. Evans had the big game last week. Now he's priced up. So I think that Evans is probably still in play, but if people are going off recency bias, maybe he'll be a little bit overowned because it is a tough matchup for him. I'm just not ending up on many Bucs, to be honest.
That makes sense. All right, let's keep going here. Carolina heading into a game with Houston. We only have chalk ownership for Christian McCaffrey, which is expected because he's been one of the touch leaders on the year, getting 25 touches per game, looking really good with them as well, other than the one game against the Bucs, who their run defense still might be good. And Houston, not much ownership for them expected. A little bit going to DeAndre Hopkins, as will always be the case because he's an elite wide receiver with an elite target load. This game, to me, Houston's defense really hasn't been that good. Carolina's defense has been pretty good, particularly in coverage, but Houston does have a lot of weapons. Alex, are you seeing this one as a potential stack here or one that could have some higher upside? Because the total's not bad, but also just doesn't seem like it's getting a lot of ownership.
I think it's probably a little bit harder to get to based on the pricing that the sites have put out. You got complete studs like Hopkins and Christian McCaffrey just at the top end price points. It's hard to probably fit both of those guys in. And then as far as other options on Houston, Hyde and Johnson are kind of splitting the work. Hyde getting more of the rushing attempts, Johnson getting more of the passing work. So it makes it a little bit tougher to stack up that side. Fuller is kind of a long shot play that could pay off. And then we got Kyle Allen throwing the ball. Not like a huge not a huge downgrade from Cam, but a little bit of a downgrade, I'd say. And G.J. Moore, Greg Olsen, Curtis Samuel are kind of on the fringe of my radar. But obviously, Christian McCaffrey, every week, he has the potential to just break the slate, so I might have a ton of him.
Ian, how are you feeling about Carolina here? As Alex mentioned, Kyle Allen did come in, have a monster game, which kind of got overshadowed by Danny Dimes' success last week. But he threw 4 touchdowns of his own, had a 71% completion rate, was going pretty deep downfield with some regularity, not a ton, but with a little more accuracy than Cam Newton seemed like he had. How are you feeling about this Carolina offense and McCaffrey in particular?
Yeah, and look, I mean, they got all that production last week against the Cardinals, who we bashed enough earlier, but the secondary isn't like that far removed from Arizona. Like, I don't think, we saw Jonathan Joseph just getting roasted repeatedly by Keenan Allen last week, and they don't really like to move their cornerbacks around. So I do think this is a spot where Curtis Samuel, these guys could get going again. And I do like Curtis Samuel here just because, look, on DK, he's at 4,600. DJ Moore is all the way up at 5,600. I thought we were past this kind of notion that DJ Moore is like the set in stone number one wide receiver in this offense. I mean, it can be any given week with these guys, and that's what we saw last week. DJ had the long touchdown on like one of his very few targets, but Curtis was actually the more targeted guy. So if we're going to get that big of a price discount, sign me up. But yeah, CMC just locked in as this talented workhorse, especially with, Kamara and Zeke on the Sunday night game and Saquon just out of the picture. Le'Veon on bye. I mean, some of the 6K running backs that we'll get to offer some value, but if you want to pay up for McCaffrey, go ahead. The one play I kind of like here the most is the Panthers defense, I think, at 2,300. I think they're kind of the cheapest you can really go in a week. There's not really a ton of other good options up until closer to the 3K range. So, look, Deshaun Watson's the man. He can pull off seemingly any play, but he also takes a lot of sacks. He holds the ball, and their O-line isn't good, but a lot of it's on Deshaun. It's just like, he's willing to hold the ball longer to try to make some of these crazy plays downfield that he ends up making some of the time. So I don't blame the guy, but the fact of the matter is he does take sacks. We saw this Cardinals pass rush last week, take over the game against the Cardinals in the second half. They're getting Bruce Irvin back, and they kind of match up okay on the outside. I mean, look, Hopkins can win against anyone, but James Bradbury is this kind of bigger body cornerback that can at least make life tough for him. The one thing, Will Fuller, I don't mind rolling some more with him, especially if Dante Jackson is going to be out, because Jackson, they had that funny 40-yard dash like Ocho Cinco tournament this summer, and Jackson lost to Marquise Goodwin, who's like a legit Olympic sprinter by only like 0.05 seconds or something like that. So Jackson can legitimately fly, and if he's either out or dealing with his groin injury, we haven't seen a Will Fuller game yet, and I think it's coming this year.
40 yards of gold, the first time that's probably been referenced on a NFL video this year. But you got your data wherever you can, so that does make sense. Also, one stat about the Deshaun Watson thing, which I pulled up while you were talking, Ian, 3.1 seconds in the pocket for Deshaun Watson, which is right there with guys who we don't love generally. Let's see, who else is this tier? Kirk Cousins, who's been holding it a little too long. Josh Allen, who has the first Josh Allen reference, not a good one, holding it a little too long in the pocket. So, and a 10% sack rate for the Panthers, as well as an 11% sack rate for Deshaun Watson. So there could be some easy points for Carolina to be had. That could be a good call at a low price. Let's go to the cheap running back tier, guys, because I know we've covered a lot of the games, and I do want to ask you guys if you have any games real fast as well. I just want to touch on the mid-price running backs, because these are the guys getting the ownership. Kerryon Johnson, Marlon Mack, we have not hit on. Wayne Gallman and Leonard Fournette, we have not hit on. All those guys at kind of comparable price points industry-wide, all going to have a good amount of ownership. Ian, I'll ask you first. How would you rank these four guys? Kerryon, Marlon Mack, Wayne Gallman, and Leonard Fournette.
I would go Marlon Mack, number 1, Fournette 2, probably Kerryon 3, and Gallman 4. And that's obviously Gallman, I think, rises up with the lower price, but just based on like raw point projections, so I would have him. Marlon Mack, his price on DraftKings, at least, his price only rose $500 since week 1, even though we've now seen this Colts offense is extremely run heavy. And last week, where Marlon was shaping up as a game time decision and had that calf injury, still played 62% snaps and had 18 touches. We have not seen him have this type of touch floor, since he's entered the league. And it was great to see that even last week when he was banged up, he was able to get that many touches. And he looked 100% on the field. Awesome stiff arm on his touchdown run. Now, home spot against the freaking Raiders, who we've saw Dalvin and Madison run all over. And no T.Y. Hilton, so there's even more reason to run more of the offense through Marlon Mack. So this is a pretty slow-paced matchup there, and he doesn't get as many targets as we'd like to see. But definitely, all in on Marlon. And then just quickly on Fournette, I know he's burned everyone this year, but look, we got to chase that opportunity at some point. He's going to fall into the end zone, and he's got a receiving floor finally. He's one of only 6 running backs at least 20 targets. He's not a guy like McCaffrey or Le'Veon Bell that they're going to split out and, really let him go to work on safeties or anything like that. But as long as they're dumping the ball off to him 6 or 7 times a game like they have been, he's not going to kill you. The cost in, low 6K, sign me up.
Yeah, the Fournette slander bothers me a lot because he's people have been really pinning everything on him. He's getting tackled behind the line over and over again because the line can't block anybody. He's got 3.3 yards after contact. And he's, as you mentioned, the rushing or the passing floor is there, 7 targets per game for him. And he's doing his best he can with those. He's not wasn't a known pass catching guy coming into the league, but he's been doing it. So I agree with you, Fournette. The slander needs to stop. Not a great matchup against the Denver run defense. That's all they've been good at so far. But yeah, I think it's the Fournette slander. gone too far the other way. Alex, how would you rank these 4 guys? Carrie on, Marlon Mac, Wayne Gallman, and Fournette. They're all in the same price point.
I'll go Wayne Gallman, number 1. I think the price is just too good. There's no real threat to his workload. Of course, his ownership will also be the highest, so I'm not taking that into account ranking these guys. Fournette, I have number 2. Just playing one of the highest workloads of any team. The Jags aren't projected to do well this week. Tough matchup versus Denver, but he's going to be out there every snap, and that should equal some good targets, especially on the PPR site. And then I have Kerryon Johnson, number 3, versus Kansas City. Detroit should be able to run a lot of plays, and with Paul Perkins in the mix, maybe he'll just kind of revert to his week 1 and 2 usage, but that should still be enough in a game with a lot of fantasy potential. Number 4, I have Mac. Brissett is like a significant downgrade to Mac, I think, because he scrambles a lot more. And I think Mac gets most of his points rushing the ball. And while they're a big favorite versus Oakland, that just doesn't offer as much potential to me.
Yeah, Mac, maybe a play on sites where you're not getting that full point PPR because the run volume is there, but you're right, not very involved in that pass game at all. Alex, any games here that you feel like we may have overlooked? Because I know we ran through some of the key ones, but I want to give you a chance to see if there are any that you feel like people need to know.
Yeah, I think those really were the key ones. I'm struggling to find any more games that are really great for fantasy. But one of the strategies, any game could be a shootout potentially. So having some game stacks of some of these other games is a good strategy. And maybe you have some game fades of some of the more popular ones like Kansas City, Detroit, or we got the Giants and Washington being probably the most popular game of the week. So I'm not really super high on any particular game, but I'll have some pieces of other ones.
That makes sense. All right, Ian, anything here that you feel like we overlooked that you want to hit on before we go into the closing round here of contrarian picks and fade of the week, which we're bringing back, mostly because I forgot that we did it last year, but I'm putting it back on the sheet. So, Ian, anything here that jumps out for you that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, just one more game. I think this Browns-Ravens game, there's a little bit of hidden upside there. And look, another 6K running back flying under the radar a little bit. Nick Chubb. This guy, we saw his snaps skyrocket last week. The Dearness Johnson era is apparently over in Cleveland. Chubb,
Gone too soon, we would all say.
AAF Hall of Famer, just cast aside. But yeah, Nick Chubb, 6,400 on DK, played 97% snaps last week, career high 7 targets. So, he's got that big playability we saw last year. I know the Browns offense has been pretty anemic so far, but Chubb's been their only kind of consistent source of goodness, and if Baker continues to struggle, not a great matchup on the road in Baltimore, I get that, but again, I don't know if the Ravens front seven's the same beast as we've seen in years past also with Mosley, now in New York and things like that, so I don't mind Chubb. And then also like small just dart throw, Demetrius Harris, the Browns tight end, Stone Cold men 2,500 on DraftKings. And since Njoku has been out, he's played 78% snaps and 90% snaps, been in almost every down tight end. His numbers are awful. It's like 4 targets for like 6 yards this season, but he's not this like dad bod running tight end. He averaged like 13 yards per catch in Kansas City last 2 seasons. He's a legit 4.5 speed guy. So, if they do kind of get the passing game back on track, I could see Harris being a big part of that. And finally, last one from this game, guys, Hollywood Brown. Mentioned the air yards earlier, but come on, what else do we need to see from this guy? He balled the hell out the first 2 weeks. Last week was a little bit of a dud, but again, we at least saw the targets and the air yards there. If you believe that he's going to have better weeks, and his price point is more than reasonable. And he's going against his Browns secondary, where both starting cornerbacks didn't practice all week, and they have hamstring injuries, which seems less than ideal when you're facing one of the faster wide receivers in the league. So Metcalf and Hollywood are like my 2 favorite GPP wide receivers this week.
Yeah, Hollywood's certainly a guy who's shown the ability to blow the top off of a defense, and he's not dealing with guys threatening a snap count like Mark Andrews is, who's a very good target as well, but still has possibly those lingering foot issues, which he definitely looked impeded last week. And Brown's healthy and doesn't have guys like Nick Boyle and Hayden Hurst taking snaps away, so that certainly could be a spot. All right, real fast, quick thank you to Fantasydraft, of course, the official home of Rake-Free Daily Fantasy. They help us put this show on every week, as well as many other shows here on the channel. So go check them out. Go check out the Hooters main event. Of course, a thing that's near and dear to all of our hearts here. We love wings, and we love hardworking women out there, and that is what the Hooters main event is all about. But it's also the largest and only rake-free contest of its kind you will find for Week 4. So go check out fantasydraft.com right now and use that promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, for your 7-day trial and your first $1,000 in rake-free entries. All right, Alex, contrarian picks here. Contrarian QB pick. Who is going to be yours for week number 4?
I actually think that the highest owned guys are the guys I like the most. So I'm struggling to find a really good contrarian pick, but one guy I do like that's low owned is Matt Ryan. I think that they really get it done through the air in Atlanta. The matchup versus Tennessee. It might be hard to find a guy to run it back with on Tennessee, Derrick Henry potentially, but beyond that, they don't really have a lot of guys of fancy value. But you get all of your money in the correlation with Atlanta, so you get Julio with a big potential every week, and then you got a couple of other guys like Sanu, Ridley, and Hooper that you could stack up as well. And that can be a recipe for winning a tournament. I mean, we've seen it multiple times over the last year.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. How are you feeling about it, Ian? Who would be your contrarian QB pick?
I'll go Case Keenum. Talked about him earlier, but just when he costs less than $5K on DraftKings, I mean, you're not risking much salary to get the guy in the first place. Again, matchup between two just awful defenses. Could definitely see this game, hitting the over and kind of seeing some points fly off the board. And when we do have plenty of options on both sides that are affordable to game stack it with, I think it's a spot you got to take a long look at.
So I nailed Russell Wilson last week. So big pat on the back for this guy. So I want to keep it going. It was going to be Case Keenum was going to be my dude, but I don't want to take the same guy. So I'll go Jared Goff. Home game Goff has been a much better Goff than road game Goff. We talked about the receivers here, a lot of ability. Cooper Kupp, a great connection. Also, Brandon Cooks, a deep ball guy who can also blow the top off of the Bucs defense. I think the run game's going to have a tough time this week, and I think Goff is the guy who could benefit. So he'll be mine. Ian, I'll turn it to you. Contrarian running back pick for week 4.
So talked a little about Gurley earlier, but I'll change directions a bit. Game we didn't talk about. David Montgomery, I think, is a guy that we can take a little bit of a look at. I mean, he's 5,300 on DraftKings, very reasonable. I think he's a reasonable pivot off of like Kerryon Johnson and some of these guys that are a little more expensive. And look, the Bears backfield has been like revolving every single week so far this year. Week 1, we saw Mike Davis, league guy. Tariq Cohen was a slot receiver. Week 2, all 3 guys were in the backfield, and it was kind of a mess. Week 3, though, we really saw David Montgomery, even though the touches weren't all that consistent. He took over. I mean, he played 64% snaps, season high. Tariq was more of a, legit backup and change of pace guy. And Mike Davis played like 1 snap the whole game. So now we have a legit 2 running back system. The Bears are home. The Vikings, typically we see their defense play a bit worse on the road compared to when they're in, friendly confines to that dome. And I think, we're going to see better days in this Bears offense, I think, in general. So this could be a spot where Montgomery falls into the end zone a few times.
Alex, how about you? Who'd be your contrarian or running back pick?
I'll go with LaShawn McCoy. I'm not sure if our ownership really is going to be that low. We have him projected for less than 5%, but he did have a big game last week, and with Damian Williams, maybe some people are just like slow to adjust their opinions. With him out, LaShawn McCoy should be the number 1. My hypothesis is that he will have a bigger workload than he did last week as he recovers from this injury. And if that comes true, he's in a pretty good spot versus the Lions.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And also, you nailed your running back pick last week too. So I don't want to give myself just a pats on the back. I forget who it was. I just had it in my head and now it just escaped me. But whoever your running back was last week. Oh, Philip Lindsay. He went off and also benefited from Royce Freeman getting hurt. But credit to you, Alex. I mean, I give equal credit here. That's what we try to do.
Thanks,
my running back pick going to be Adrian Peterson. This is a weird one. I get it. I don't think this game becomes a blowout right away. I think Washington's going to move the ball. I think the Giants are going to move the ball. I think Peterson, the game script is going to favor him because of that. I think he gets 2 touchdowns this week and just maybe doesn't have the monster 100-yard day, but I think at his price point, that'll work, and he's a pivot to Wayne Gulman at his price point, so that is going to be my dude. Alex, back to you. Contrarian wide receiver pick.
I'll go with Albert Wilson. He's been tremendous when he's been on the field for Miami over the past year. He just hasn't been on the field this season up to this point, but all the signs are that he should be good for this game. And if he plays most of the snaps, I think that it could be a pretty good fantasy performance from a sub 1% guy.
Ian, how about you? Contrarian wide receiver?
Yeah, I'm rolling with Dontrell Inman. You know, he's not going to cost you anything. He's going to be out there, 80% plus snaps with Mike Williams gone, Travis Benjamin doubtful. So if, assuming the Dolphins are going to focus most of their attention on Keenan Allen as they should, I like Inman's chances against cornerbacks that probably, shouldn't have jobs.
That seems fair. I'll go with a more expensive contrarian guy, Julian Edelman. I think people are sleeping on him a little bit. If he's playing, obviously the chest, he is still questionable, but the assumption is that he's going to play, and they're going to need him against this Buffalo defense. Buffalo is just a tough team, and Tre'Davious White should be on the outside with Josh Gordon. I think is going to mostly limit him. Certainly Philip Dorsett can take some targets away, but Edelman to me looked really good last week before he got hurt. And I think it's a nice spot for him with under 1% projected ownership for him. So he would be one of my dudes. And now here it is, the big one, the return of fade of the week to close us out. Ian, I'm going to give it to you first. Who would be your fade of the week out of all these guys we expect to have some ownership?
It's tough. I'm going to fade Cooper Kupp, I think. And it hurts because he has looked, that catch and run he had in week 2 was wild. I saw the 2 touchdowns in the red zone last week. But again, we got to be careful about assuming this LA Rams offense is going to be consistently running through their slot receiver when there's so many capable options elsewhere. We have seen them really spread the ball around over the last 2 seasons. So I think it's a little bit recency bias. And his price point is okay, but when the ownership discrepancy is just that big to one guy, I think you got to take a long, hard look at it and think about going elsewhere.
Alex, how about you? Fade of the week to close us out.
Oh boy, this is the one where we can get in trouble. Bring on the tweets. Anyway, I think Eckler is my fade. He's going to be one of the top popular guys. And my hypothesis is that, this coach speak about Melvin Gordon. The most recent thing that came out is that he'll play limited snaps. I think that it's more just like they don't want to show any weakness with this holdout. But I'll be surprised if he actually does just play like a few snaps. I think that he'll probably take more of the workload than Justin Jackson, if I had to guess. And we don't have reliable information because I find this coach speak pretty suspect and given the context of the situation. So I think that Eckler's number 1 status is threatened by Gordon coming back.
Interesting. Another his price point, that would certainly be a big one. I'm going to go with another chalky guy. I'm going to go Wayne Gallman. I just don't think the talent's there. I think the passing attack can do it. Sterling Shepard, a guy we didn't talk about much today, but getting really good separation despite being a guy running mostly intermediate routes. Really like what I've seen from him. Also running over 45 routes per game. Only played 2 games with that concussion, but he's looked really good. So I think there's some ways to get away from Gallman. I'll certainly match the field at least, but he is going to define the week for a lot of people out there. So he'll be my fade. All right, guys, that is it for us for this week. I'm going to turn the floor over to Ian. Ian, I'm stealing this straight from that Wings show because I like the way they do that. Turning the floor over to you. Anything you want to plug at all in the world?
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at iHeart. It's IHARTITZ, not an S. And, I do wide receiver, cornerback, tight end analysis every week. I break down every backfield. Then have my mismatch manifesto where I look at all sorts of things. So tune into that, and let's go win some money this week, guys.
Yeah, go check out at iHeartItz, HARTITZ on Twitter. Ian's doing a lot of great stuff over at World and adding a lot of value. Alex, final words before we close out here.
Yeah, Ian, thanks for being on the show, man. It's a pleasure. And thanks, Fantasydraft. I think their main event this week is going to be one of the most profitable tournaments in the industry to play because they simply charge less money as an operator to offer this tournament to you. And also, over the past few weeks, it hasn't filled, and that's just them giving away money on top of that discount already. And thanks everyone for watching and supporting the show. I think it's really fun to talk these contrarian takes with you guys. So I hope we came up with some winners here, and maybe these fades of the week we can hit on those as well.
Hopefully Dontrell Inman carries us all to the pay window in week 4. We appreciate all you guys for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Tell a friend about On the Contrary. We are every week now at 2 p.m. Eastern time on Saturdays. We'll be back next week with another high quality guest. So we appreciate you guys watching. And of course, good luck.